years ago, they brought John Lewis to Manchester. And I asked him a question once, and I said, Mr. Lewis, what's the difference between the movements of today and the movements of yesterday? And he said, y'all don't sing enough, right? And that hit me like those bricks on that wall right there. And I was like, damn, you're right. And so, again, when you talk about granted goodness and joy, that's what we think about, which is, this work is really, really hard too.
Right.
It's really, really difficult, but we have to always remind ourselves that this is also joyful work.
Yeah.
And it's through and with community that we can bring joy to each other. And I sometimes will use this analogy of a savings account. We always have to make deposits into our emotional savings account because every now and then we're going to have to make a withdrawal. And the more that we can make deposits through art and music and community and collaboration and gathering, the more we're going to be able to navigate the difficult road that lie ahead until we reach that point where, regardless of who you love and pocketbook size, we can all each relish and see each other's humanity.
You're listening to Granted Goodness, the show where we share optimistic stories of progress, innovation, and problem solving from all across New England. Proudly hosted here in the Granite State. My name is Andy DeMeo, and today I speak to Anthony Poore Jo Porter from the New Hampshire Center for Justice and Equity, where they elevate and empower people of color in New Hampshire by fostering connections, changing systems, and meeting community needs to make a better Granite State where all belong. This episode was produced in partnership with our friends at New Hampshire Possible. Enjoy the show. Anthony and Jo.
Hi, Andy.
Hi, Andy.
Welcome to Granite Goodness.
Thank you. Welcome to our home.
Yes, our new home, at no less.
Yeah, we were chatting a little earlier, and you were like, "Are we going to do this virtually, or are we going to do it in person?" I was like, "No, I want to come see it."
Yeah,
because this is a new space for you guys, right?
It is.
We moved in officially a month ago. What was the last week of July? I think when we actually officially moved from Amherst Street to now we're at in Concord Street.
Do people give you like housewarming gifts when you move into a new office space, or is that not a thing? I feel bad. I should have brought you something.
No, nobody has, so you shouldn't feel bad, and nobody needs to bring us anything. We feel very well equipped. We just want the presence of people's company.
Okay.
Oh,
there is a lot of cool art here.
Yes,
it is a lot of cool art here because honestly, we think art is a part of this movement.
Yeah.
Right. We have to bring joy, and one of the ways we can bring joy to this work is through art.
Yes.
And so you'll find original artwork throughout our office, from Kate McCary or to Positive Street Art. It's all throughout. And we have more coming. We've got a open house scheduled for October, and we'll be unveiling a new mural as well for the office.
Right on.
And we're lucky, too. One of the very first things that we had available to us was the talents of an intern. And we will give you a gift, Andy, before you leave, which is our sticker series.
I was going to say, is it an intern?
No. We have, if you've ever seen us out in the wild, as we like to say, our swag is stickers. And our stickers, at this point, are 20 different social justice icons from time, space, activity, community, through everything from, racial rights to disability rights to economic rights.
Yeah.
And each of these folks represents some portion of the movement. And our very first summer, had an intern by the name of Matthew Lambert, who came to us from Hampton, New Hampshire. He was a Wheaton College student at the time.
My mom went to Wheaton.
Nice.
Yeah.
He had a very interesting combination of academic experience that was the intersection of visual arts and the political economy.
Yeah.
And we said, we're new and we need swag. And he hand drew images of social justice icons that we turned into stickers. And that's the swag we give out at events. And it is amazing to see how excited people are.
Yeah.
And now that we have 20, the hardest thing for people is picking one or two.
Uh-huh.
So we have to bring enough that people can get a whole set if they need to.
Oh my gosh.
So you'll get a set of those before you leave.
I feel like I wish I had them right now. We could pull them up.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, not only are they made for good swag, but they're also a wonderful educational tool.
Yeah.
Because particularly working with young people and students, many of them have never heard of some of these folks before.
Sure.
So it gives us an opportunity to talk about, hey, how was the United Farm Workers Union created and who was a part of that and those kinds of things. And who was Fannie Lou Hamer?
Right.
Most folks haven't heard about her. And the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act. And so for young people in particular, it can bring history to life for them.
Yeah. Well, art, I love that so much, is like art as the way in, right, to learning about this rich, cultural, amazing, stories of people working hard to make the world a better place, right? Which is a polite way of saying it. But we're here today at the New Hampshire Center for Justice and Equity, and here in beautiful Manchester, New Hampshire. And I'm very excited to be here with the both of you.
I'm proud to say that we celebrated our third anniversary, technically on June 22nd of this year. And we're entering our fourth year and haven't stopped since we hit the ground running.
I was involved in the health work group of the 6 work groups that existed in the Race and Equity series. I had a moment of reflection in that time where I thought I would really like to be more involved in that work as it moved into the new organization. So I connected with a couple folks, and including Anthony, over the summer of 2022, and said, quite frankly, as a person who has experienced some of those racial inequities in the state of New Hampshire, I had an opportunity to be part of the work.
Right.
As I said to my family, as I leapt out of a very comfortable 15-year career at the University of New Hampshire into a new organization.
Completely unknown.
I don't want to just read the books. I want to do the work.
Yeah.
And so it was a real important opportunity for me to do that. Change can be uncomfortable, but it has felt like the right decision from that moment on.
Yeah.
And selfishly, from my perspective, when Jo expressed interest in coming to work with the New Hampshire Center for Justice, I recognize her skill set, her networks, her relationships, not only in the public health space, but across multiple domains, was going to be absolutely critical to us achieving the kinds of success that we had envisioned together. And so it was like a godsend when Jo said, hey, I think I'd like to work with you. And I was like, hey, I'd be dumb if I didn't say, come on in.
Right.
He didn't even know at that point that it was all about dark chocolate and good coffee.
I had no idea.
But those are my other attributes.
No idea.
You're like, that's what I bring to the table.
That is what that's what I bring on a regular basis, is dark chocolate and good coffee.
And cupcakes on it.
And cupcakes today, because I was passing by.
It's not, the work is not worse for having cupcakes and dark chocolate and dark coffee.
Yeah, no, it's good.
By no means.
I respect, there is a big, beautiful bowl of candy outside the door.
And you'll notice there's Dove dark chocolate.
Yeah.
We're always good for a good time. We're treats, you name it.
Yeah.
We're here.
Well, it gets at a thing we were talking about a little bit, like off camera, right? This concept of like joy, right? And purpose and, optimism, right? This theme of possibility, why we're here, New Hampshire Possible. And the impression I'm getting, like, tell me if the timing is wrong here, but like, certainly across a lot of the country with the summer of the George Floyd protests, in the wake of COVID, like, it felt like there was this real fever pitch of energy to really focus on these big questions of like, what is the status of race relations in the United States? What is the experience of non-white people in the United States? And so much energy and resources like were poured into that, and now a little time has passed. And so I would love to hear from both of you, as like people living and working here and being involved in these questions in New Hampshire, how did that period of time change the landscape of this work?
That's an interesting question. I never really thought about that. I think what happened to Michael Branch and all the others, Sandra Bland, I could go down the list,
Right.
And of course George Floyd. I think it created the conditions, the enabling conditions that allowed people to look at some way more introspectively than they have in the past, and then recognize that there's something that could or should be done about it. That being said, that guilt, if you will, began to subside shortly thereafter. And so I think it created the opportunity and the conditions for people to say, yes, this issue around, or disparities across issues around race or queerness or disabilities is something that we need to really focus in on to ensure that people have equitable opportunity to achieve their best selves.
Right.
That being said, what we've begun to see is a bit of a retrenchment from that. And it has caused our work to become increasingly more difficult and has caused us to take more of a defensive posture just to maintain the strides that we've made since 64, 65, and really 68 with the Fair Housing Act, because we're starting to step backwards now. And so I think it was wonderful for the brief moment that it lasted. It created the enabling conditions that allowed us to launch. And now we're in a place where we're trying to shore up the boat, make sure that we don't continue to take on water, keep what we have currently available to our communities, and ideally press ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think the reality that we find ourselves in is while it feels like the headwinds have changed a lot for us in this work, and, we didn't exist before the George Floyd murder, and the Race and Equity series certainly was active, and it gave us, as people who were involved in that work, a place to come together around these issues, right, which I don't think we knew we needed until we were in those spaces.
Yeah.
And I reflect on a number of those sessions with, if it's possible to think about it this way, sort of painful joy. Yeah. You're with people talking about really painful topics, but with a group of folks for whom you think you can sort of share that pain and relieve it to some extent. And I think that was incredibly valuable. I think our work maintained and this organization launched in the face of that at a time in which we were very hopeful that progress would continue. Mm-hmm. I think to Anthony's point, where we stand today is trying not to regress, right, instead of making the kind of progress we had hoped to make. That said, what we've been very fortunate to find is that there are still many pockets of people who want to continue to do this work together. Yeah. And so there's a vocal minority of folks who believe that this work is unnecessary, but a much greater group of folks who understand that it still is. Mm-hmm. I think for anybody, when you really push on these issues, it's hard and it's painful. And mm-hmm. it's natural to sort of say, I thought we'd be done by now.
Right.
And I think that was part of the challenge for folks is that they sort of said, hey, we're going to take this information on. We're going to do a bunch of efforts around, diversity, and then we'll fix it. Right.
Right. Forever.
Forever. And you're like, okay, well, it's 2025. And if we just take the summer of 2020 as a starting point to be able to have those honest conversations, to think we would have solved hundreds of years of history in 5 years is just unreasonable.
Right.
And so I think we're contending with the unrealistic expectation that folks would think they didn't have to think about this any longer after mm-hmm. 5 years. Mm-hmm. And I think while we're struggling with that, we continue to find really, really dedicated organizations, people, community that are still understanding the importance of the work. Mm-hmm. We are working really hard to help a collective voice continue to work to understand why we still have to have these conversations. Because I think for folks who've lived this experience, we all knew 5 years wasn't going to be enough time.
Right.
And Joe, to your point, and Andy, something I often will say is that and I'm thinking about the title of your show, right? Granite Goodness.
Yeah.
The reality is that there are more good people out here than there are bad.
Yes.
And to Joe's point, it's usually the vocal minority who gets all of the love, gets all the attention, while the majority of human beings and Granite Staters are just out there trying to do the right thing, take care of their family, go to work every day, and make good choices. And so there are, I think, one of my bigger life lessons as I continue this work is focus on the good folks, because they're the quiet ones out there, and those are the ones that are looking for support, mm-hmm. looking for safe places to have conversations that are thoughtful and are informed, and we hope to create spaces for that, but then be able to take those conversations and turn them into action to move forward on positive public policy that affects everybody in a positive way.
Yeah, and I love everything you both just said. As someone who tries to think a lot about some of the big problems that we face and engage with, my own perspective and experiences, I feel like people often argue past each other when they talk about this, because you have all, I mean, you know what I'm going to say. You have all kinds of people, lovely people, and they say, well, what do you mean? I'm not racist. Like, I don't hold prejudice. I try not to use words I know are outdated or offensive, or like this, I think, is where most people, they would fall, at least in America. Like, they're happy to be like, I want to be respectful to everyone. I believe in live and let live, right? And they're maybe used to the phrase racist or racism, meaning kind of this very clear and present prejudice, right? As opposed to if you're this characteristic, if you're from this ethnic background or whatever, it's literally observable in all kinds of data. You're more likely to have a lower quality of life in this way or this way, right? And like this has been charted and studied to death. And so it gets at this distinction that people, I think, struggle to make of like, well, I'm not racist, but it's hard for them to talk about. A lot of society is still quite distinguished in quality of life indicators and all these other things on the basis of race or other social indicators that you could talk about. That's just my perspective and experience of like where I feel like people get lost, but I'm a layperson. You think about this stuff all the time.
I've given that some thought.
Yeah.
And I think, again, I'm going to go back to my original comment, which is, most people are good.
Right.
And I think most people would like to see their partners, their peers, their neighbors do well. That being said, I think that sometimes people will confuse, and this is me personally, sometimes this idea of race and racism and privilege.
Right.
And I'll give you an example. I think it is legitimate for those folks who are living in, say, the North Country of New Hampshire, who were traditionally lower class white folks,
right,
to suggest that somehow they have been impacted negatively by, say, for example, the demise of the paper and pulp industry up north.
Yeah.
And as such, they've struggled to make ends meet.
Right.
That's legitimate.
Yeah.
At the same time, what they may not recognize that there are certain privileges that come from being a person of European descent that others might not benefit from.
Right.
That doesn't make them wrong.
Yeah.
It just makes them in some way uninformed from the benefits they might receive that others don't.
Right.
And so I think sometimes people confuse issues of race and racism with privilege. And I'm not going to argue against my neighbor in Groveton, New Hampshire, who's struggling to make ends meet.
Yeah.
Because the economy is in somehow decline. They're not wrong.
Right.
But at the same time, they need to recognize that that there are others who might be in a similar situation or worse for things that are outside of their control, or either because they were born in a specific zip code,
right,
or who their parents happen to be from, or who they happen to be.
Right.
Yeah, and I think the reality is that for a lot of folks, that term racism has a connotation and a sort of visual image that is rooted in things that are very obviously racist, and it's less tied to the things that are maybe not as obvious as obviously racist.
Right.
So if we take, for example, folks may say, well, I'm not racist because I'm not the person who is going to, create barriers for folks to go into a public park if they're a certain color.
Right.
And you're like, great, that's wonderful. We really do think that was, an incredible progress point for us as a country that we stopped that kind of segregation.
Right.
But that didn't solve racism. It added a success story in a whole host of things that were really detrimental.
Yeah.
So the idea that we are still on the continuum of solving for those things, I think a lot of people, they lose that because the only image that they associate are the really big, grandiose, obvious ones that are, blazed in our image, and hopefully are blazed in our images that are blazed in our brains so that we never repeat them.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that we talk with folks a lot about is, there's a lot of common ground for folks, particularly in the struggles. I mean, as Anthony was just talking about, there's a lot of common ground for different communities of different color around things like poverty and economic struggles And, we could take the home ownership, right?
Access to
Home
affordable
ownership.
childcare,
Yeah.
That's
home
really
ownership,
hard.
whole slew of them.
And we just did this report about home ownership. And I like to talk about the results of that in the way of saying the findings of that report are, it's really hard to get a house in this state for everybody.
Yeah.
And if we solve for some of those problems, we will solve for that issue for some folks. But if we don't solve for all of the problems, then we won't solve that for all the folks.
Yeah.
So, for example, we can solve for zoning issues and we can solve for lot size, and that will take care of a lot of the issue. But if we also don't solve for discriminatory lending, then we haven't solved it for everybody.
Right.
And that's the kind of conversation I think is super helpful for us to have, which is this isn't a we only need to focus on the issue for one population. It is we need to focus on the issue for all the populations.
Most of the time, I think when they encounter these terms like justice and equity, they think about race, right? But it's more than that.
It's totally more
right.
than
It's
that.
like
So much more.
Yeah, pick your thing. I don't know if it's accurate to say we get fixated on race because it's visible, right? In a way that sexuality maybe isn't, unless you wear earrings like I do and stuff like that, right? It's a funny thing to think about of like, okay, what's the visible way of othering somebody or not, right? Do people try and put you into a box in that way of like, oh, you're the race people, but really it's so much more than that. This is your time to like
Joe,
get at that.
you can start.
If you're tired of answering that question, by the way.
I've actually never been asked the question that way before.
Speaking as a bisexual man, for the record.
Yeah, I mean, I think for sure, particularly in this climate that we're in today, where there are lightning rod terms that we're surprised have become lightning rods. I think the reality is that the reason that we focus in first on communities of color is, to Anthony's earlier point, when this work was happening, finding a organization that was able to focus primarily on communities of color generated the need for an organization like ours.
Right.
We are incredibly fortunate to have partners who are doing amazing work for lots of other communities who are struggling with a variety of different needs and discriminations and issues around disability or LGBTQIA rights or things. And so I think for me personally, I'm still pretty proud to be focusing in on that, and I'm doubly proud to be focusing in on it alongside some really important organizations who are focused primarily on other communities that are having similar struggles, but the commonality of our causes and the commonality of our needs bring us together. And when you sort of think about the positive parts of our work, being in community and alongside those folks, despite doing it largely at this point, in a lot of ways, trying to address the struggles,
right?
There's sort of strength in that collectiveness.
Well, yeah, and I was just thinking, and there's joy in that collectiveness.
100%.
And I argue and I suggest all the time that joy is revolutionary.
Yeah.
Bringing joy to this work is revolutionary. And so to Joe's point too, is allowing people to recognize that in fact we do have more things in common than that separate us. And your question was, are we often kind of pigeonholed as being the black organization?
Right.
No,
I'm not.
I don't think so. But I do appreciate that folks have a deeper appreciated understanding of the organization now than they had maybe originally. And I think in part it's driven by, I'll use this term, our humility.
Yeah.
It's a recognition that this work is very difficult. It requires what I call the 3 Ps: patience, persistence, and perseverance. And ultimately a recognition that we cannot do this work by ourselves.
Yeah.
And that we can only do this work through coalition with peers and institutions who share a similar value set.
Yeah.
And that has been extraordinarily enlightening to me and gives me sometimes personally hope when sometimes it seems hopeless.
Identity politics, right, is a phrase that gets beat up a lot, and people use it as I think, an unfair and cheap cudgel to criticize whoever they want. I've talked about this on the pod before with different people. The people who aren't immersed in this world, right, by choice or not, some people, like, it's not really their choice. I think it can be confusing of, well, why are there so many letters in the never-ending alphabet of the LGBT? And I'm thinking of folks in my family who are older who are like, they're nice people. I don't know that they would really be interested or understand why it matters to have a name and an understanding of whatever shade of queer identity you want to think of and talk about, right? I get where that person's coming from. But at the same time, all the letters of the alphabet, right, to describe people in that way, it matters to them because they've never had the option to be out and be able to have words in language to be like, I'm transgender, right? Like, that's pretty remarkable. It's pretty recent. I don't know that we appreciate how recent it is. And so I always try and flip that dynamic when I encounter it. If people are like, why are you so obsessed with slicing and dicing people based off the color of their skin or the shade of their skin or whatever kind of non-straight sexual orientation they have? Well, the identity and the presence of it is deeply affirming to people, right? Like, it's important that they have language to describe it and say, this is who I am, and I want to say it.
And I think it's important to give permission to people to be proud of any part of their identity, right? And so sometimes having a word to describe it engenders that pride. It's like, yeah, I can talk about myself in this way, and other people will either understand it or respectfully try to understand it,
right?
You know, and I think that's true across lots of different dimensions. So, you know, when you think about any part of yourself, when you describe it, you know, you might want to be talking about the nuanced part of it. So, you know, it's like, yeah, I'm from the US, but I'm from New England, and I'm from New Hampshire, and I live on the seacoast. Like, there are values that I feel like people want to talk about for themselves for lots of different, to your point, like slicing and dicing the way that we talk about ourselves or the parts of our identity that we want to talk about. And I don't understand necessarily why folks take exception to other people wanting to be able to describe these various parts of themselves in any of these ways. And so I think it's so interesting when we say that we don't want folks to be able to describe one part of themselves that they're proud to be, but other parts it's okay.
Yeah.
Because I think umbrella terms, you know, it's so, you know, I've spent a lifetime filling out demographic surveys that don't have me in them.
Yeah.
And so, you know, is it damaging to me? Maybe not. Is it really refreshing when it works and I can actually find myself in a place? Yeah. So, you know, I can remember being a kid doing the surveys and being like, I don't know how to answer this question about my race because I'm more than one.
Right.
And you had to pick a category.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know how to pick between my mom and my dad.
You're right.
Right. And so finally there was a 2 or more. It's like, oh, would you look at that?
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, I'm going to put those down. And so then I was Asian and I was white. And then they're like, then I'm thinking to myself, like, Asia's a really big place.
It's like the biggest place, actually.
Yeah, right? And I'm like, there's a lot of different parts of Asia.
Yeah.
And I have, you know, some understanding of some of it, but not all of it.
Right.
And so can we talk a little bit about the little part of Asia that I have a familiarity with because of my mom? Yeah. And it's kind of nice when people are like, oh, it's not just Asian.
Right.
It's Filipino. Like, yeah, because I'm not the same as all the other Asian countries.
Right.
And I don't have any understanding of them, nor should I try to represent them. And so I do think that there's, again, value in the specificity, both for myself and for the authenticity of what I do and don't know.
Hey there, I hope you're enjoying the episode so far. If you're liking it, it would mean a lot if you could take a moment to give Granted Goodness a rating or review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. This is one of the best ways to help more people discover the show. But the very best way to support us is to subscribe at granitegoodness.com, where you'll find an abundance of stories about problem solving, progress, and optimism all across New England. And speaking of cool local people, this episode is shared in partnership with our friends at New Hampshire Rocks. You can learn more about them at nhrocks.com. And now, back to the show.
I think at the end of the day, it's pretty simple. Everyone wants to be seen and heard.
Right.
And, by creating space for them so they can find themselves, I will oftentimes use an analogy of a tent.
Yeah.
As we think about the work that we do. And I encourage people to just envision a large tent that has no walls.
Yeah.
And what we wanted to create is that tent that has multiple seats, that no matter which side of that tent you come in on, you can find a seat for yourself.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the space that we're trying to create here, that no matter where you come from, no matter who you love, who your pocketbook size, your race, your identity, that stuff. Because, I'm of mixed race too. My mother's a woman of European descent. My father's a black man. But my identity is that of a black man.
Yeah.
And so actually decoupling this issue of race, ethnicity, and identity also, I think, is really, really important too.
Right.
But I think it boils down to everyone just wants to be seen and feel as if they belong to the greater community, the greater good. They want to be part of something larger than themselves.
Right.
Community, a nation, a group, whatever.
I love talking about the terms and the words and the identities because it gets at what I think is this interesting and important distinction. There are two terms that I feel like we use as interchangeable, but they're really not, right? Minority and marginalized. You often hear them used in the same context, effectively as the same thing, but they mean very different things. Do you think about that distinction often?
I'll start. I think what you're expressing is something that I've thought about over time, is that if you use the term minority and or marginalized, they're oftentimes used interchangeably. Yeah. And just because you represent a small subsection of a particular population doesn't necessarily mean that you are marginalized. Nor are, frankly, and Joe, I'll need your help on this one, as I think about this in the inverse, are all marginalized people members of a minority population? No.
Right.
But we have a tendency to bring these two terms together and use them interchangeably. And I think it's because we don't have a deep understanding of this distinction. There is a distinction there with a significant difference.
Yeah.
But in the vernacular, usually there is no distinction.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I think the reality is that historically, populations who have been the minority have also been marginalized for the work that we do. That's why it's so important to be issue focused.
Yeah.
Because again, if we go back to the housing example, housing is an issue for the majority.
Right.
And the minority. And some folks are further marginalized from their capacities to solve for that issue because of historical practices.
Yeah.
And so the broad brush recognition that at the end of the day, the goal is to dig into the why. Mm-hmm. Do we have the outcomes that we see? And then let's talk about the solutions for those, rather than simply say us versus them.
Right.
And I think that's really where we want to spend most of our time and energy. It's interesting when you talk about race in particular, we still exist in a society where a lot of people literally wear race on their skin.
Right.
And that leads to very specific, sometimes outward discrimination in really public ways. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a reason why we need to continue to talk about those things from the broad bucket of communities of color.
Yeah.
But when we really start to break down a variety of issues at the topic level, it's important to dig deep. And I think, going back to your original question, or one of the original questions.
I asked four poorly worded questions all at once.
But in that 2020 time frame, what it felt like to me was people were ready to have those hard conversations. Mm-hmm. And where I feel like maybe we've gone is, as we've dug deeper into those hard conversations, for some folks, they got too hard. Mm-hmm. And that's where that shutdown has started to happen. Again, reiterating the fact that I think for some folks, they were hoping they only had to have a hard conversation for like a year or two.
Right.
And I think what we've realized is that was never practical. The solutions require investment of time, of resources, of energy, and that got really hard for a lot of folks.
Yeah.
I just want to add, I was just thinking out loud, sometimes, when you ask that question, Andy, where you're saying that, Manchester or New Hampshire, rather, forgive me, is, predominantly a white state, so why should we care? Or why does it matter? We see that typically play out. Joe and I and some of our partners, we have a weekly media scan. Mm-hmm. And as part of this media scan, it goes every week without a doubt. There'll be a couple posts, social media posts that we'll talk about. It'll make this connection between the lack of diversity, quote unquote, in New Hampshire and the lower crime rates. Right? And they try to use whiteness as code for safe or safety.
Yeah.
And we know that's simply not the case. You can look at the data and whatever, but does it matter? And so when I heard you say that, that's immediately what it went in my head. And it's so first of all, it's not true. But when you think about New Hampshire in general, is that this narrative around that there aren't people of color here is just simply not true.
Right.
If you look at the data, we have 1.4 million people in the state. People of color represent almost 250,000 people in the state. Not quite, but almost 250,000 people in the state.
Try telling them they don't exist.
Right?
Try saying that to 250,000 people.
And that being said, those 250,000 people don't just reside in, say, Manchester, Concord, Nashua, Portsmouth, or Nashua. They're in all 10 counties. Mm-hmm. And I happen to live in Coos County part-time as well. So I'm one of them.
Right.
So I think we need to push back against this narrative that diversity or communities of color simply don't exist. They, in fact, do. They're a sizable population, and people will hear me say this often, that we have relationships, resource, now institutional discretion to use those resources as we see fit. We can take a much more offensive perspective to this work than we historically have been able to. And when you look at the fact of the matter is, from an economic perspective, New Hampshire would have lost population had it not been for the in-migration of people into the state. And those who are coming from our communities of color, the majority of them are working age,
right,
which has a direct and positive impact on our workforce.
Yeah.
Oh, and by the way, they also are bilingual.
Yeah.
So they bring in additional assets to this workspace and in this space called New Hampshire that we wouldn't benefit from if it was just about having babies.
I think it's so interesting, right? We spend a lot of time talking about that image that gets conveyed that New Hampshire is a state of really well-off white people. And that's not the narrative that's true for most of New Hampshire. Mm-hmm. And when you sit in community for any number of reasons, not to be negative, but you hear folks who say, I don't fit that.
Right.
I
Are you
wish
doing
that,
really well and right?
Yeah, that's really not me.
Are you a rich white?
Yeah, I'm not doing as great as some people are. Yeah. And again, that's not what we're saying is there are opportunities for us to collectively think together about ways to help lots of people address some of the concerns that they have about struggles living here, whether that, again, you can list them off, right? Mm-hmm. You look at the things that people are really worried about in this state, and it's economic income. I mean, it's economic outcomes. It is income.
Right.
It is, rent. It's finding a house. It's finding daycare. It's finding any number of those things. And so, our work isn't let's create a litany of problems and sit on those for a while.
Right.
It's let's be really thoughtful about the solutions that benefit folks, and when we need to, add the layer of what does discrimination add to the complexity of that solution finding for some populations.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I was just going to say, really looking to achieve what I call practical solutions that are both effective and efficient in the allocation of resource. And while we have it, let's figure out how we can do that to the best.
You were saying something earlier, talking about working in coalition and how exciting and empowering it can be to really open up with other people. And that's a thing I often find myself thinking about and talking about, is for all the benefits of news and journalism, it is often just a snapshot of whatever is on the collective consciousness this week. And it doesn't give you a picture of, okay, what are people working on right now that's going to manifest 5, 10, 20 years from now, right? And there's all kinds of things that we enjoy now, right, that are the product of really thoughtful people, working together 5, 10, 20, 30, 50 years ago.
For sure.
Right? And so this is one of the things that I try and highlight on my show, and I think is part of the ethos of New Hampshire Possible, is who are the builders today and what are they building out that we're going to be so happy about, and people they don't even know are going to be so happy about on a timeline they can't even fathom, right? So share a little bit of that. What are some of the most exciting things or the work that you're proudest of, or we're thinking about these issues in a way nobody else is, and 20 years from now, this is the impact we want to have. When you think about the collaborative work you do, like what really gets you jazzed about it?
You can start.
Wow, there's a lot.
I'm bad at, I always pepper questions.
Well, I mean,
I think out loud.
What is the thing you're most proud of? And that's a difficult question to answer, because there's elements of this work that I'm incredibly proud of every single day. I think I think one of the things I'm most proud about, happy about, is our ability to work in and with community in coalition. I think it's an appreciation when you go to our website and at cje.org, you can check us out, but you look at our values. And one of the things that I think is missing there, and I've talked about this a lot, is when you look at all our values, love, trust, accountability, I think the one that we forgot to include was humility. And it's a recognition that this work is bigger than just any one institution. It's bigger than any one individual, any one community, etc. And if we're going to affect change at the systems level, we have to work in coalition, utilizing a Big Ten approach, so everyone can see themselves where they're at. The thing I'm most proud about is understanding that we don't have all the answers, nor should we, and we shouldn't be expected to. But there are other incredibly smart people out here who are doing this work every single day that we could, honor their contributions. They've been doing this work for a long time, build on that, work in partnership with them in collaboration to, and with new folks who are in this space. The New Hampshire Outrights of the world, the BIPOC Congress of the world, Racial Unity Team of the world, all those 603 Forward, all these institutions that we are blessed to work with. So one, we can add value without being duplicative, and appreciate what they've done in the past.
Yeah, I mean, I think generally speaking, the thing that I am maybe most proud of, or the thing that I am really pleased that we've been able to do, again, in conjunction with lots of other folks, is start to reshape that narrative we were talking about. I think I'm a data person, so I'm pretty happy we got data briefs out there.
Right.
So being able to really reset the frame that some folks have about who we are as New Hampshire, and that is telling the story from the data, but also, we've had a solid 3-year almost now history of at least twice a month blogging, and those blogs are rarely about us.
Yeah.
Those blogs are almost entirely about other organizations, other people, other topics, other initiatives, efforts, etc.
In the tent, other people in the tent.
Other people in the tent.
Yeah, that's right.
that are doing really great stuff, and to be able to have created a platform to be able to centralize some of that in one place is incredibly gratifying. And simply telling that is gratifying. Learning about it is an honor. I mean, and I say that with complete honesty.
Yeah.
I came into this work with having done work in the health side of the house for a really long time. longer than I want to say. But I've had the incredible fortune of meeting some really strong, powerful, passionate people in sectors and areas that I had no exposure to in the past.
Mm-hmm.
And I am incredibly grateful for 3 years of that. And then, to have some sort of history in it, history of that work in our blog is sort of a library that I go back to quite a bit because it's been a learning experience for me.
I often joke about, granted goodness goggles, right? The lens I try and see the world. And people, they'll be like, oh, you do good news. And what they always say is, that must be hard. That must be hard nowadays. And I'm like, ugh, you don't get it, right? It's like, there's actually too much that I can't keep up.
Yeah.
Not trying to allege like, boy, whoopee, everything's great. But, examples of positive developments that are not small potato, stupid stuff. Like, there are too many of them. I literally can't keep up with it. So the thing you just said of actually, hey, if you want to talk about what are really cool examples of people doing DEI, justice, equity, adjacent work, or just examples of like cool Black entrepreneurs or gay entrepreneurs or whatever, like in New Hampshire, around New Hampshire, here's a really awesome blog, twice a month for the last 3 years. Go look there. You see it in your life and it's just your networks of people, but now you can be like, literally go on the internet and there's this person and this person and this person. There's an abundance of examples to point to. And it's a cool thing to be proud of. You should be proud of it.
Yeah, and I think there are people who, just as a quick plug for some of the organizations and activities that we get to be part of that I think other folks would find really interesting. And again, in that space of, if you need an afternoon to go be someplace where you'll walk away feeling pretty hopeful, Multicultural Festival in Concord that's coming up on September 21st is a really good example of that, where we are fortunate enough to be sitting at a booth and we're surrounded by people who are celebrating culture. And it's pretty fun to just be able to be watching that happen. And they're celebrating in lots of ways. They celebrate through dance. They celebrate through art. They celebrate through food. They celebrate through community. And so you get to sit in that. And again, to that space of like, there are people who are probably a little surprised that's happening in New Hampshire, but shouldn't be.
Right.
And so it's a really good opportunity for that. We had New England BIPOC Festival was a couple weeks ago in Portsmouth. It's kind of similar experience where you've got, music and food and dance and art and community, and more food, which is just, it was amazing.
Yeah.
But again, I think there are, for as many times, I think as we start to have these conversations about justice and equity with a lens of problem statements and solution finding, we also have an opportunity to have those conversations around celebration.
Yeah.
And the more people, to Anthony's point, we can bring into the tent of celebration, the easier it becomes to recognize how community focused we can be. And that focus brings us a lot closer as a population.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to take the tent of celebration.
You're welcome to have it.
Welcome to have the tent of celebration.
I like that so much. People always talk about the tent, the big tent, but I've never heard that phrase. I like it.
Yeah. I mean, it's a good one.
Fun.
And we like a tent with no walls and plenty of seats.
Yeah.
Big seats, small seats, tall seats, short seats. We got seats for everybody.
Right.
And that's kind of the thing. And you made me think about something earlier, and I'm just going to put it out there. And we talk about this issue of joy. And I was thinking about a story. And I shared the story with Joe a long time ago. And I think when you mentioned you were in the office and you saw the art, there's a reason behind that. And so years and years ago, I think it was part of the Black Women's Health Project. Years ago, they brought John Lewis to Manchester.
No kidding.
And actually, it was the NAACP. I think it brought him. And we were here. It was right at the YWCA. And we spent, as part of the group, helped set up and, get Mr. Lewis kind of settled and all that good stuff. And I asked him a question once. And I said, Mr. Lewis, what's the difference between the movements of today and the movements of yesterday? And he said, y'all don't sing enough.
Huh.
Right? And that hit me like those bricks on that wall right there. And I was like, damn, you're right. And so, again, when you talk about granted goodness and joy, that's what we think about, which is, this work is really, really hard too.
Right.
It's really, really difficult, but we have to always remind ourselves that this is also joyful work.
Yeah.
And it's through and with community that we can bring joy to each other. And I sometimes will use this analogy of a savings account.
Right.
Right. And I call it an emotional savings account. In my private life, I use the same analogy, which is we always have to make deposits into our emotional savings account because every now and then we're going to have to make a withdrawal.
Yeah.
And the more that we can make deposits through art and music and community and collaboration and gathering, the more we're going to be able to navigate the difficult road that lie ahead until we reach that point where, regardless of who you love and pocketbook size, we can all relish and see each other's humanity.
Yeah. Oh, I like that so much.
I didn't make it up. It's not mine. So
yeah.
He said that, not me.
We were talking a little bit beforehand. How do you get people engaged online and get them interested? And totally, that's important to do. I'm not like a super activist myself, but I know a lot of people who are really super activists. And
but isn't this activism that you're doing now?
I guess so. I guess,
Yeah.
I would define it as activism. If you are bringing good stories forward that people can benefit from,
right,
so they can see themselves either in that story or see them being a part of that story,
right,
then you are an activist by default.
That's a good point. That is a good critique. Because what I was saying, I think, would be a limited view of saying, oh, it's just for marching and protesting. But you're right. Activism is not just, it's actually all of it, it's all kinds of things. So thanks for saying that.
No,
but I think that's a really good point. I mean, I think lots of folks, and I think this is what at least keeps me going, because there's an extension of that comment that most people are good, that most people want good for other people. Mm-hmm. And most people want to be somehow associated with that, but they might not have the time, the resources to dedicate, hours towards a cause in ways that feel as tangible as some other folks might be.
Yeah.
And I think part of what we want to be sure of is that anybody who wants to get engaged in the betterment of society has a mechanism to do that, whatever resource they can bring to that table.
Right.
And we joke a little bit sometimes about part of this whole idea of these stickers is simply having a sticker on your water bottle and being someplace where someone says, "What's that about?"
Right.
That what might be a 30-second conversation might be the level of activism that person has the capacity to do, and we're all for it.
Yeah.
Right. So again, I think to your point about you're not really an activist.
Right.
I think there's whatever part of a person's experience can get harnessed for the level of activism they have the capacity for. That's the kind of support we want out in the community, and those community events that we get to be part of is a little bit of a window for us to be able to have those conversations with folks.
Thank you for saying that. I agree. The train of thought I was thinking was when John Lewis was young, right? Mm-hmm. You think, okay, what did it mean to be an activist in the 60s? Technology's great, right? It's a great connector. It can be used for good and for evil, but you don't have the option in 1965 to just be on your phone and tweet something and be like, okay, that's what, there's almost an illusion I think a lot of people have of I'm going to post a thing and that's my good thing. Back in the day, everyone was just outside, there was no option to tweet about the thing. If you wanted to go learn about it, you had to go outside, you had to go to library.
Yes, but the times were different. The tools were different. The circumstances were different. The overtness of the racism and white supremacy was different back then.
Yeah.
And so just like the tools that they used were appropriate for 1964, 65, 68, whatever, we have different tools now.
Right.
And I don't know if it's fair to compare today to yesterday, or frankly, yesterday to today. Are there similar in similar concerns? And sure, but the circumstances are very different.
Oh, for sure.
They're much more nuanced now.
Yeah.
Than they were maybe in the past.
Yeah.
And so we have to bring that same level of nuance to the game.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. No, that's a good point to make. It's what it means today to protest or try and take action on a thing is a very different question than what it would have meant in like 1965. And
I mean, imagine 1965 with a GoFundMe site.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Right?
It would have been different. Yeah,
it would have been different.
Yeah.
It would have been different. Back then, they were raising money through churches, through bake sales, and and potlucks.
Right. But again, I think part of this is, recognizing that every contribution matters.
Right.
And so to have a situation in which somebody says, all I can do today is repost that thing, the collective power for folks in being able to do that is really strong. And I think one of the things that's really important for us as a state is we keep seeing and hearing a very different, truly populist opinion on some of these social issues that's very different than what might be the loudest voice. Mm-hmm. And so we do see and hear some pretty loud negativity,
right,
and hateful language. But we also sit in community where we see the majority of folks are not in that space. And I think the challenge of how do you ensure that majority population of folks who have really strong, good intentions, but are really busy doing all the other things,
right,
can continue to be represented the way that it should be represented. I think that is the challenge that we continue to try to figure out. And to your point, that's the tool evolution that we are still finding ourselves in. We don't have the answer to that yet.
Yeah. I'm thinking always of the different ways that differently abled people can be involved today in a way that would have been harder, right? And so it's like different tool set, as you said, right? Well, we could go forever. I want to be respectful of your time.
Okay, we're down. Let's go.
Is there anything you really wanted to cover that you feel like we didn't get a chance to chat about? I mean, probably there's like 10 million things.
Yeah, I was going to say.
I said I'd give you this chance.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm just really grateful, first of all, that you have decided that the good stories are the ones that need to be told.
Amen.
So we're pretty excited to be on Granite Goodness. We believe in Granite Goodness as a concept.
Granite Goodness believes in you.
Pretty excited to be on the Granite Goodness podcast. I think, again, I think the reality is that, for anybody who's listening and says, I'm also exhausted by the negative echo chamber, to feel like there are ways for us to harness that energy for real good positive things. And I'm just really hopeful that we can continue to work within the Granite State to get that kind of energy collected and used in really positive ways, because I think at the end of the day, that is what folks really want.
Yeah.
And lots of folks are just tired of the negative noise.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it sounds strange, and my partner in crime here has heard me say this multiple times, and I'm going back to your example of someone just posting something. I'm going to screw this up because I've got this Rush song stuck in my head.
Which one?
All the world's indeed a stage, and we are many players, dun, 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 and portrayers, which they took from Shakespeare, right?
Yeah.
And I'm trying.
We're gonna have to look
moving
at
pictures, I think.
Okay.
But I could be wrong on the album. That being
I'm
said,
so ashamed I can't name the song right now.
Okay,
I'm a
it's
huge
We're
Neil
all
Peart fan.
fans of Getty and Alex.
Please
and
don't
Neil.
cancel me for not knowing
I
the
won't
rest of
cancel you. I promise I won't cancel you. But this kind of goes to Joe's point, and is part of kind of our business ethos here, which is everyone has a part to play in this. Mm-hmm. And no part is any more important than the other part, whether it's big, small, medium, or something else. And those parts are important. Those conversations, those informal kind of just get-togethers. For me, as I look at the bricks on this wall, that small stuff. Because really, for me, the devil's always in the detail.
Yeah.
That small stuff is the mortar on the bricks that binds our community's house together.
Right.
And so for me, it's this idea that whoever is listening to this is that if we can be of service to them, or in support of them, I'd love for them to reach out to Joe or I or the center, anybody here.
Yeah.
And I guarantee you that we may not be able to help you, but if we're not, we can point you in the direction of somebody who can work with you, support you in the efforts that you're a part of, and encourage you to come under our tent.
Yeah.
And be a part of this larger effort. At the end of the day, and I'll say this in very plain spoken English, I think that good will win over bad, and it's going to take time for us to get there. But it's nothing good has ever happened without people.
Yeah.
And people coming together in coalitions to say, you know what? We all have a different path, but we see the same endpoint. And I'm going to do my lane, and you do your lane, and you do your path. But we're all of our oars are pointing in the same direction.
Yeah.
And that's here in New Hampshire that I think about is that everyone feels as if they belong.
Right.
And their contributions will matter.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then the last thing that I would say actually is anybody who really wants to, do a thing in the short term, we have the ability to nominate your own icon.
Oh.
So we have 20 icons in our sticker series, and we do a sticker series every year. So on our website, you can nominate who might be in our next set of social justice icons. So
Lionel Loveless.
So people, go to the website.
What is that website, Joe?
Is nhcjd.org. And if there is a person that you think should be represented in the icon series, we'd love to hear that, receive that nomination. And we're super lucky that we have an incredibly motivated and bright high school intern who has had a really great first month with us researching all of the nominees that we've gotten so far. And so then she'll present those folks back to us and we can make some selections. So it's a way for folks to honor the people that they think were pioneers in this work.
And not only can you nominate an icon, you can also sign up for our blog.
That's true.
And I guarantee you, it is some of the best reading that you'll be able to come across here in New Hampshire. That really speaks to the issues of the day in a language that everyone can understand and appreciate the significance of.
Love it. All right. Final question. Why New Hampshire Possible? What does it mean to be a part of this movement, this group?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, the belief that, it is possible for New Hampshire to achieve, these kinds of outcomes for everybody is fundamental to why we exist. And so it's a very natural alignment for us.
100%. And I just like the term possible, which for me aligns with possibilities. And it's for me personally, it's a recognition that there's so much more that we can accomplish together. Mm-hmm. As opposed to separately. And when we do things together, anything is possible. And I firmly believe that. And so call me Pollyannish, but that's what I believe. And I think that the majority of people do believe the same thing.
I agree.
And so for us, it was a no-brainer. Do you want to be a part of something like this and join with other organizations or institutions who are working towards the same goal? That is, create a state where everyone can grow and prosper and belong to and contribute to the greater good so we can all achieve the social, economic, and educational outcomes that we all aspire to? Sign me up every single day.
Man, they should take that clip and use it. They can sign me up. Perfect. Well, Joe, Anthony, this was such a pleasure.
Thank you, Andy.
Thank you very much for taking the time. Keep up the great work.
All right, well, we'll get you some stickers.
Yeah, I need a sticker.
Yeah, we need stickers.
Hey there, thanks for spending some time with us, and I hope you enjoyed the conversation. You can learn more about today's guest and how to get involved with or support their work in the show notes. If you'd like to suggest a guest for the show or have any good news story tips, shoot me a message at hello@granitegoodness.com. Music for this episode was provided by the band Sneaky Miles, who hail from Newmarket, New Hampshire. Until next time, I'm the creator and host of Granite Goodness, Andy DeMeo. Thanks for listening.